Good evening, everyone. So tonight we are going to be doing our live on Sidepulls, Bosals, bits, and more. And so I really want to break things down, talk about what each of them are, what disciplines they're used in, who uses them, why you would use them, and so I have some notes here. I'm just going to reference back to some. So Bosals. What is a Bosal? So a Bosal is it's a type of hackamore. It's a nose piece that's shaped kind of like a teardrop, and it's braided out of rawhide. It's actually a lot more severe than what people give them credit. Like a lot of people, they talk about Bosals as like starting a Bosal because it's something you want to do before you go into a bridle, but that's actually not necessarily true. So I was reading a forum about Bosals, and they said that a horse should be able to be soft and supple in the bridle before moving to the Bosal. Now, I know I know trainers that do start in a Bosal, and it works out fine for them. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but in my experience using a Bosal, I've found that if a horse doesn't understand giving and suppling to that pressure, collecting those different things, that you can tend to rub the top of their nose raw just because it is quite coarse. And then also the sides of their jaw will also get rubbed raw. And so a Bosal is a direct pull mechanism. So you pull that direction, there's pressure on the other side, and it pulls that nose piece into the side of their mouth, and they move off of the pressure. Same thing, both directions. When you pull down, it's going to put pressure on top of their nose there. It's really a traditional style that's used a lot by the vaqueros in like the Spanish style of riding. I know a trainer I was talking to the other day about it who uses a Bosal. He says that he'll get a horse nice and soft in a Snaffle Bit, then he'll move them into a Bosal, use both the Snaffle and the Bosal some, and get them so they're responding to that Bosal, and then they'll use that Bosal for a while, soften them up, and transition into the bridle. And so that trainer uses the Bosal as kind of middle ground. So when he has the bridle on, he'll have both the Bosal and the bridle, use two sets of reins. And for him, it really helps transition into that bridle, so that bridle isn't something that's totally new. He can go back to that Bosal and cue with the bridle at the same time, and it really helps him and his horses, helps them understand his message, which I think is a great idea. A side pull. What is a side pull? A side pull is basically a halter with rings on each side. A lot of trainers, a lot of people use this to start with because it can be a lot lighter on a horse, a lot softer on them. Horses are trained in a halter to lead and stuff, so it's again a pressure that they understand already. I've never used one, so I can't speak to how they are, but I've seen people use them and have good working horses. Now bits. Now this is where when I start a horse, I do my groundwork in the halter, and then about the day before I go to start riding, I'll put a Snaffle Bit on and just get them used to it, flex them with it, and I'll just start using the Snaffle Bit from there. And the first 3 months or so is entirely in that snaffle. A snaffle bit is what you would call a direct or it's a contact bit. And so that horse doesn't really get any cue out of that snaffle bit until you have contact on the bit. So your rein getting lifted up and down, they might feel that some, but really the cue where you're making contact with their mouth is not happening till that rein comes tight. And so it's great in the beginning. It's not a super severe bit. So I'll get a horse soft in the mouth, so they'll collect, soft in the body. I do so much of my stuff in body control. That horse almost will be able to do everything with with your legs, your body cueing them as much as the bridle. And so just like that other trainer said that he uses that Bosal to help transition, I find that my body language with the horse really helps that transition process as well. And so when they understand, I put my right leg on them and I pull, then they move off of it. It's the same. So then I'll put that curb bit in their mouth and I'll put that right leg on and I'll cue, and it's a different pressure on their mouth. They're unsure, but they know that leg means move. So then they move off of it. And, that 3-month mark, I have, so my bridle that I move them up into is a curb bit with rotating shanks. There is 1,001 bits out there. And the one industry that you go into that you'll see even more than 1,000 bits is the barrel racing world. No offense to any of you barrel racers if you're listening, but I see barrel racers come to the arena with, they have this chain bit, they have that bit, they have this one, and I'll be completely honest. In my professional opinion, I think that the bit doesn't matter that much. A side pull, a Bosal, a Hackamore, I don't think they matter as much as people give them credit. I think people are trying to solve problems that they've created. I ride every horse in the same bits. I think it has a lot more to do with the hands of the rider, the foundation that you put onto the horse. And so when I work with these horses, like I mentioned a minute ago, it's foundation, body control, learning to move those hips, ribs, shoulders, bending at the pole, giving, softness. You need to start slow. Get all this stuff done. Like I see a lot of people, well, my horse is going to be this. And I'm like, well, start with the foundation. My horse is going to be with cows. Yes, that's good. Let's do 4 months in the arena. And I guarantee you put that horse on cows with 4 months of arena work, he is going to be so much further ahead. The cows is what comes easy. The barrels is what comes easy. But the foundation is what prepares for these things. And I think that probably translates into every into every discipline in the horse world. The foundation is what everything's built off of. I have mentioned this lately that I've been watching so many dog podcasts, and it's funny, dogs and horses, it's so much the same, and it's easy to explain it, or maybe easier for me to explain it with a dog, So if you have a hunting dog and you rush through your foundation, you go out to hunt with this dog and you need to recall them. Well, if you didn't spend that time in those situations that dog didn't have all these distractions practicing the recall and getting that perfect, well, when you're in that high pressure situation where there's a lot of distractions, there's no way you can expect it. And so what do people do? They ramp up the shock collar. They do this, they do that. Well, that's the exact same with bits, People run the barrels without that foundation. What does that horse do? He gets all blown up in his mind and he blows past the first barrel. Well, what do you need? You need more bit on that horse. And I see that so often. I think it all is tied back to just the foundation work, slowing it down, getting softness. And so that's kind of where I stand. Some people have thought, or like, oh, everyone is so different with bits. I go online and I watched a YouTube video about correctional bits because I had one in my tack room. I was like, I want to learn a little more. I watched one video and this guy was saying, I start every reiner I ride him in a correction bit. I'm like, oh, okay. And that guy could turn hard, stop hard. His horses look great. And then the next video I watched, this person says, you should never ride a horse in a correction bit, except for in extreme situations when this horse has a hard mouth or whatever. And so, that's one of the problems in the horse world is everyone is going to tell you to do something different. And I'm not telling you to ride in a curb bit. I'm not telling you to ride in a side pull. My honest opinion is work on your foundation and work on your feel, and what you want to ride in is going to work because that's what you're going to teach your horse. I just saw a comment a little bit back about my bison. So I ride my bison Indy in a Snaffle Bit. I ride my longhorn steer in a Bosal. And so, when I got Jasper, my steer, he was a ex-team roping steer. And I thought, there's no way a bit will fit in a cow's mouth and work. And so I said, I'm going to start him I'm going to ride him in a Bosal. So I started him, got him going. And that's what I ride him in today, is a Bosal. And we have a lot of fun. But then I saw this picture of a person branding calves off of a steer, and they were riding their steer in a curb bit. I was like, what? And so about that time, that's when I got my Buffalo Indy, and I was like, well, we're going to try this a little different. And so I rode him in a Snaffle Bit, and he steered around. Now, it's very hard to compare bison and cattle to horses because they are so different. As you can imagine, bison and cattle do not soften the same way a horse does, or at least neither of mine have. But back to the conversation, I really think it all ties down to your hands. Now, there was a comment up here, I'm just checking it, by Sonia. Sonia said, I have race horses and they are all very soft in the mouth, and also do cattle work with them to get them away from the track. Yeah. And so there's an extreme, like, race horses are like the how do you say it? What people think about them. Like, if I were to think race horses, I'd think a horse that's running through the bridle like crazy. But clearly, if they have the right hands, or if the rider and the trainer has the right hands, it's definitely possible to keep those horses soft. Now, soft horses, like a soft mouth, has been something that I have learned a lot about in my life. I have lots to learn still, but one of the big things that I've learned is just because a horse will turn without much pressure doesn't necessarily mean they're soft. I used to think a soft horse was one that you could just steer around with one hand and neck rein, and my opinion has changed so much. Softness to me now means like their body, their body, their pull, their how they give. And this is just where I'm at in my education. And when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about body control on a horse, but now, I really want them to be soft in my hands, bridle up. I want them to give their body, to pick up those shoulders, to move those hips in. And the bridle is just part of that tool, but it all stems a lot more down to your hands. If you have any questions about bridles or softening horses up, please feel free to ask here. I have a little bit more here, and then we're gonna wrap things up. So reins is one thing. Here's another comment from Michael. I am fortunate enough to have a horse that accepts me without a bit or saddle and can do a shooting pattern full out, 300% attention, voice and body, or voice, body, bit. And so it's all how you train. Everyone's so different. That's a perfect example. So reins, there's a couple types of reins. On a Makati, on a Bosal, you'll use a Makati rein. So that's spelled M-A-C-A-T-E. And basically it's like a loop rein that comes up and then ties back onto the Bosal and then comes up with a big halter shank for your tuck in your belt or loop on your horn. It's a 24-foot rope. I use a Makati on my Snaffle that I ride my colts in. I don't really have a good reason why. I kind of like it. I used to always ride my colts with split reins, and I thought I'd try something different. So I tried the Makati, and I didn't like it, and now I love it. I don't ride my colts in anything else, and so it's really what you get used to. There's roping reins, which have their place too. Basically, it's just a hoop rein that clips on and clips on. Is a loop in the middle for roping and things like that. They're nice because then you don't have the ends of your reins to get in the way. One thing that I really like about both Makati reins and split reins, though, is that popper, or the end of your reins. I use that so much. Like when I get a horse to move out, I cluck to them, I squeeze with my legs, and then I spank. I hate having to constantly kick a horse, pedal a horse, and so I want to be able to add enough pressure that horse will move. And it doesn't take very long of using that spanker. Like if you build that pressure up, they're going to move, and they learn to start moving when you cluck to them. We have a comment here from Alyssa. It's surprising how many people in the horse world don't know about softness. I think it's very important in every event and discipline, especially in having a foundation, like you say. Yeah, definitely. When I was in high school, I saw people flexing their horses, which is like the number one exercise I use now. I use a lot of exercises, but that is one of the most important ones for me leading up. But anyways, I would see these people flexing their horses, and I was like, they're just going to make their horses rubberneck. Like they're going to be riding their horse, and he'll just run through that bridle because he's been taught that he can stand there with his head pulled around. And now I know that it's much different. If they can give to that bit and soften their head, their body will follow. Like sometimes horses really run through the bit, which I don't think is accurate. They're not actually running through the bit. Their body is their body's not following their mouth. And so then if that happens, like I actually had a colt yesterday I was riding. I have about a month into him. And I was loping circles, and the gate was down there, and he was really leaning into that gate. Well, his head was turning, but his body was going that way. And so what I did, I brought that outside leg in, and I was bumping him, making it uncomfortable. And as soon as he got his body back in line with his mouth, that's when I released. And so there again, it comes down to body control. Now that horse is very young; he's just learning. And so that's what we were developing. When he was getting that body out of position, add some leg, maybe some spur, and when he moves that body off of that pressure, release. And so steering a horse comes down to way more than just the bit you're using. There was one more comment here. Some people teach a horse to understand and be soft. Others yank, pull, and force them. Oh, one of my biggest pet peeves, and you'll probably hear me say this 100 times if you keep following me, but when I see someone go out there and go to back their horse up and they're heaving and pulling, and that horse is sticking his nose out and shaking his head and barely taking a step back, just inching his way back, oh, I'm like, soften your horse. And it's so much about just when you release the pressure with that backing up. Like when I teach colts to back up, they aren't soft when I start, but by the time, like the other day, I had a client come and look at his horse. It was the first time I taught this horse to back up. So I went and just thought, oh, I'll see if he does it. I teach him to back up on the ground so he understands backing off of some pressures. Now we're going to teach him a new one since we're on saddle. So I picked up on both reins, bump, 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 give him some energy, and he was just rooting that nose up. He wasn't sure what I was asking. And so then I decided to change it up a bit. I reached back with that foot, moved that hind leg, or moved the hind end off of pressure, so he was yielding the hind quarters, and then I transitioned that to both reins back, and he like shuffled one step back. And then I released my legs, held with my hands, and then he softened that head, and I let go with my hands. And it didn't take 5 minutes, and I had that horse backing up 4 steps with his chin tucked, and started building on some energy with it. And so if you time it right, it really, you can change your horse fast. And so that's kind of what I had planned with bits and bridles and side pulls. Keep using what you're using if it's working for you. I wouldn't start changing tons of different bits, different bridles, trying to figure out what the problem is. I would start changing what you're doing first. There's one more comment here. They said, it's Sherry. I have a horse that the trainers that I have had for her use all kinds of bits, usually the Snaffle. The trainer that I bought her from suggested that I use a correction bit. My horse was ridden as a 2-year-old and then just left in the pasture until she was about 8. I realized that a correction bit can be a hard bit, and I am always very aware never to jerk on her. She is a more go than whoa horse, which makes her too much horse for me, lol. Is it possible that she has become this more whoa than go because of the bit? Or so she said she is more go than whoa. I think if you transition the bit up too fast, like on these colts that I ride, if I throw them right into a curb bit and they don't understand how to move their body off of pressure, it can get frustrating for them. It can be a lot because they don't understand. I talked earlier about that transition, and that transition of having that body control understanding and then moving them into that bit, I find helps because they don't get as frustrated. Whereas if you just moved them into that correction bit or curve bit, there is a lot more pressure on their mouth, and you're not able to pull their head out the same way as you could with a snaffle bit. A snaffle bit, you pull that way, and that bit pulls their head that way. A curve bit has shanks on it, and so the purpose of a shank is to create leverage. So one of the things that makes curve bits nice is you pick up those reins and it puts a little bit of pressure on that bit. Well, that leverage, that's giving them a little bit of a cue. You don't have to have your rein contacting like you would with a snaffle, but it also, if your horse doesn't understand body control and moving off of pressure, and then you start adding that leverage and they're not moving, so you pull more, and there's so much, it can be very overwhelming for a horse because they don't understand. And so I'm not sure if I understand your question, because you said she's more go than whoa. Is it possible that she has become this more whoa than go? So you switched it around. Horses that are frustrated will tend to not be acting relaxed, which makes sense. And so my biggest advice would be make sure she has, okay, she's more go than whoa, yeah. So my biggest advice is start your horse in the snaffle, something that is less pressure. It could be the side pull, whatever you choose, and get them to understand that moving off of pressure and then build up. Well, everyone, I also have some exciting news. We're going to be posting our new ebook. I don't know if you've had the chance to go to my website, barjlhorsetraining.com, and download our 3 exercises everyone should do with your horses. We are going to be replacing that with an ebook all about trust. One of the things that I found that throughout all the horse world, people want a horse that trusts you, respects you, and to build that bond with their horse. And so I wrote a book about how to do that. And so stay tuned. We're going to have that posted in the next couple of weeks here. We're pretty excited. And I talked a lot about building that body control. If you don't know where to start, I have a horse training series on my website called the Foundation Series. And that is where it all begins. In that series, I show all my exercises. So go to barjlhorsetraining.com. We have a monthly subscription. Check it out. First 7 days are free. So if you like it, you can stick with it. If not, you can change your mind. But start getting that foundation there. And like Sherry, your horse, I think getting that softness in the start is going to make a huge difference in that snaffle bit or something that's not overwhelming. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Goodbye.